Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're beginning a new study today. It won't be a very long study, 7, 8, 9 sessions, but we want to talk about David's wives. Um, and we're not exactly sure how many wives David had or how many concubines he had. Um, but we are given the names of 8 of David's wives. None of the names of the concubines are given to us. Um, so God permitted polygamy in the Old Testament, but there's not a single polygamous relationship that is in any way effective, admirable, that works. God made from creation one man for one woman. That's clear. But God did permit um, polygamy in the Old Testament, um, and uh, Solomon quite famously had 1,000 women, 700 wives, and 300 concubines. Concubines had not exactly wifely status, but were considered bound covenantally, and when they were bereft of the man who with whom they were concubines, for whom they were concubines, they were considered widows, as we will see in these passages. In 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 2 through 5, we have a list of the wives that David has with him in Jerusalem at this time. This is as he begins his reign as king of the southern part of the kingdom. And it says, sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. His second was Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. And the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, um, and king of Geshur. The fourth was Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. The sixth, Ithream, by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David at Hebron. This passage, the emphasis is on the sons who are born, not the wives. There are 2 wives named that are not mentioned here because they're not with David yet as wives in the palace. And Jerusalem isn't the capital yet. Very early days in David's rule, he's ruling from Hebron. The first is Michal. Michal is his first wife, the daughter of Saul. We'll talk about her next time. But Saul had given her to another man, Paltiel. David doesn't have her back yet. And then there is Uriah's wife, whom he also takes from her husband, Bathsheba. So she's not mentioned yet, but she will be mentioned later. Although there are other wives that may not be mentioned because we're told in 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 13, right after Jerusalem has been taken, and as he is turning it into a capital city, it says, meanwhile, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he came from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. So, it seems like from the spoils of Jerusalem, when he took Jerusalem from the Jebusites, that he took wives and concubines who are not named. Um, just something about the concubines as well. There must have been many of them. During Absalom's revolt, when David left and had to flee from Jerusalem, it says in 2 Samuel chapter 15, and we'll look at verse 16. Um, let me see. There it is. When he's leaving, fleeing the city, it says that David went out and all the people with him, but all of his household with him. But the king left 10 concubines behind to keep the house. So David leaves 10 concubines behind when he flees Jerusalem during Absalom's rebellion. Leaves 10 concubines behind to keep the house. Now, the fate of these concubines is, well, it's kind of sad, and it's important um, because David's longtime advisor, he had 2 that are mentioned in this event. Hushai and Ahithophel. Ahithophel immediately joins forces with Absalom in Absalom's rebellion, and he is Absalom's counselor to be ruthless and to make clear to the people that he's king now, not his father David. He's the one who advises him to pursue David's people and to engage them and to eliminate his father. But he also tells Absalom to do this in front of the people of Jerusalem. Absalom, I'm in chapter 16, verse 20, 2 Samuel. Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give your advice, what shall we do?" And Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel hear that you have made yourself odious to your father, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. So these 10 concubines who are left behind, Absalom, upon Ahithophel's counsel, takes them to the roof of the palace under this canopy and then has sexual relations with each one of them so that everyone can see. It's a way of disrespecting his father. It's a way of asserting in a very um, pheromonic way, in you know, in a way that demonstrates he has more testosterone than his dad. He took his father's concubines and had sex with them on the roof of the palace so that everybody could watch him do it. And it was a way of cutting all ties with his father and explaining to I'm king now. I'm the big dog. He's not the big dog anymore. I'm the big dog. Of course, he wasn't the big dog because he wasn't in office for very long before his forces were defeated by David's forces. And despite David's best efforts to preserve his life, he was killed in the battle. We're not going to talk about that story. But what happened to these concubines? So when David came back to his house at Jerusalem, 2 Samuel 20, verse 3, the king took the 10 women, the concubines whom he had left to keep the house, and placed them under guard, and provided them with provision, but did not go into them, and they were shut up till the day of their death, living as widows. So, since they had been violated by his son, he wouldn't have relations with them anymore or a relationship with them anymore. He provided for them, but basically kept them under lock and key until they died. And they were living as widows. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? They were considered widows by the writer of the text and by the one who inspired the text, who is the Holy Spirit. David's relationship with women is problematic at best. He has moments where he acts admirably, but generally his relationship, not only with his wives and his concubines, but with his daughter as well. His daughter Tamar is just completely problematic for all the things he excelled at, all the things that he is admired for, and he continues to be the man after God's own heart. His relationship with women, the women in his life, particularly his wives, his concubines, and his daughters, is quite problematic in the text, and the Bible is honest about that. We'll see that as we study them. We're going to talk about Michael tomorrow. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.